here we are, the day we've all been waiting for. I know I've been waiting for this for about 3 or 4 years, man. The day I can actually go ahead and talk to this man and be the interviewer and have him be the interviewee, man. Usually it's the other way around. As always, I have with me the Gen, not any Gen, just the Gen, because without the Gen, the program would be the Pits.
That's a lofty introduction.
I don't like. I'm already. When I was watching the numbers countdown, I was like listening to music. I thought like I was gonna be dropped in the middle of medieval times in the center of Game of Thrones or something. That was pretty. There's some.
Well,
you guys have got some. You guys got some cloud on the intro area. I'd be hyping that up. Nice work.
thank you. Yes, and that could still happen. I mean, anything could happen when Jen and I get together. So let's go ahead and let's start out because there's a lot of people that know, there's a lot of people that we're connected to that know who you are, but there's a lot of people probably listening to this for the first time that have no idea who the heck Jimmy D is. So who is Jimmy D? Why does he love crypto? And take it from there.
Yeah, so I guess like I got into crypto a few years ago. My friend called me up and he's like, "Hey, do you want to go to this meeting and check it out?" And I kind of first learned about it in late 2017. And I was kind of coming off of the back of a business that I was trying to pull together myself in the real world. It was based on permaculture and those principles. And I was looking at how to have, a sustainable life. I think people kind of thought I was crazy at the time because like I live in one of the most populated cities in the world, one of the biggest cities in the world. I live in Osaka. And I wanted to put together this business where, it would allow people to be able to grow their own food. Because like I said, eventually something's going to happen. Like, it just basically takes out society. It might not be like zombies who are coming to, create a whole apocalyptic world, but like something bad is going to happen, right? Like we're in this too deep. And ironically, if we look back at what happened 2 years ago, like I was completely right. Even though I was like the Mad Hatter nut dude, like when COVID first hit, prices soared. And like people were fighting over toilet paper in Australia and like, throwing oranges at their kids because they weren't picking up apples fast enough in the States, right? Like and like the world was kind of like going downhill, right? Except for my country where everyone was calm and passive and nobody was fighting over food in the supermarkets, which is really crazy, right? Like Nick's been here, he knows, very modest people, which is really nice. And so those two things, having grown up in, small town in Canada, but like doing my postgraduate studies in Hawaii and getting involved with like community organizations and structures and cultures and working for volunteer organizations that go and create food sustainability on small islands, kind of paralleled with what I saw about the key to crypto, which is the fact that it was decentralized. Right. Technically speaking, nobody should be able to turn your tokens off. Right? It's the same thing. If you go to a supermarket and it's the end of the world, and somehow the supermarket owner didn't wake up, and you're locked out, and you pick up a stone and you bust the glass window and you take some bread that you need to survive, or grab an apple off of the shelf. I mean, or even hop a fence and take an apple out of somebody else's yard. Like, you're breaking the law, right? And like you could go to jail. Somebody else has the ability to take that most basic of things that you need to survive, which is sustainability on the food sense, away from you. And so you become kind of a slave to that inability to access the things that you most need to live. I mean, California is a great example. It's illegal to trap water from the sky in California. You have to let it run off, which then, of course, goes to other states.
Yes.
Like, this is against the law, which is nuts, right? And so the thing that I like about crypto is it's similar, right? Like, they have this old adage that is not your keys, not your crypto, right? But if you control the keys, technically, you should control the crypto. Now, that's not always true because we're not as decentralized as we think. Like, a lot of it is pretend. And it only works because people believe in it. And I've got a really interesting case that shows that it can be your keys and still not your crypto. But it's a whole different story for the lawyers. But like, there's interesting thing if you think about it. Saying the world going a little bit mad. Now, the world was maybe always mad, and I wasn't paying attention. But like, I remember it being mad in the early 90s when America was going into Iraq the first time. That was a little bit crazy, right? But then like things from there, they kind of, went downhill. And now we've got like, we're on the brink of World War III. We've got people in various countries that can basically have their bank accounts taken away because they can be blacklisted because, of facial recognition and socially profiled to not be able to get access to what's theirs. So for me, the beauty of this is decentralization. Point number one. Point number two, the ability, because I'm an educator a little bit, the ability to be able to tap into a system where you don't actually have to be part of the system that exists and be overworked and underpaid and can't get out. Right? Now, we live in the West, so it's kind of difficult for me to move back to America and get a living wage, to be honest. But like, I mean, most people can probably do it. Like even if you work at Walmart, you can still afford to shop at Walmart. You can't afford to shop anywhere else, but you can afford to shop at Walmart, right? That's not always the case, right? So what I like about crypto, play to earn games or NFTs or art, is that it's globalized in the sense that, you can connect and see and be with people from all over the world. But I mean, we're elite in the West, right? Like to pay $5 for a loaf of bread and, $12 for a package of eggs. It seems ridiculous, but like that's right. Like in certain small towns in Africa, I mean, they're free because there's chickens everywhere. But like these people, they don't have the ability or the access to this economy or to this banking system. So when you play in things like NFTs and art, especially, I think it's great, right? Like if you're selling paintings on the street corner in DC for $2 or $3 or $5, painting. I mean, you're gonna be there for a really long time to be able to make a livable wage. And like, I don't even know if you can paint that many things, right? But like, you can sell NFTs that you created, right, across the world for $5 and live in a country like Indonesia and have that be a livable wage, right? And so I think the beauty of that, there's two sides to it, but I think the beauty of that, the potential for that, as the great equalizer for me is really quite fascinating. So yeah, I'm a decentralist at heart. I guess that maybe answers your question. I don't know. It's early. I'm still drinking my coffee.
That is true. That is true Jimmy D right there, right, Jen?
I think so.
Yep. I'm going to let Jen go ahead and ask the hard-hitting questions on, on the environment and all that stuff, and then I'm going to go ahead and come back and I'm going to hit you with a couple things like your time with GenerEOS and the Pomelo grants and stuff. So, Jen, this one's all yours. Go ahead, take it away, my dear.
All right. Well, you mentioned food security, and that's obviously, it is very near and dear to my heart. Most of my questions kind of relate to that and to permaculture. So if you don't mind, what is permaculture, in case anybody doesn't know?
Yeah, it's a little bit tough. So it was the kind of brainchild of a person by the name of Bill Mollison, who grew up he was Australian. And he lived in Tasmania, like kind of, I don't know, on the plateaus in Tasmania. And one of the harshest environments, we're not talking like like desert Sahara harsh where you die because you can't get out. But like the diversity of species where he was so small that it was really difficult. Like Australia in general has some really big problems because when certain species are introduced, that the ecosystem is so fragile because they're so unique that it's really hard to kind of bring that back. So Bill Mollison was out in Tasmania, and he realized that like this ecosystem was so fragile, and he started thinking about how he could sustain it, right? And so he came up with these I guess 10 permaculture principles and design ethics, earth care, people care. They stretch all the way from growing food to constructing communities and economies. Certain things like value the edges, right? Like we look at natural ecosystems and environments, and like it's not all monocropped monoculture. And a lot of what we do at Whole Foods is fake. It's a scam. Right? Like we have organic, fruit that we sell on monocultured farms that are trees in rows that utilize more resources because they're not using herbicides and pesticides, right? And this is really problematic, right? And so what permaculture does that's a little bit different than a lot of these, eco design sciences is permaculture looks at the environment that's there, and then it looks at ways to enhance that environment to capitalize more upon the natural essence of the place. So where a lot of farming, even eco farming, would flatten the field and plant a bunch of, crops, monocrops, and say, okay, well, we're not using pesticides and herbicides. Come support us. We're great. We're not Monsanto. What permaculture does is actually it creates hills. It creates ditches. It creates boundaries. It creates ways to trap the water and slow it down. It creates the ability to, capitalize upon the natural benefits of the ecosystem, and in some ways bring in big machines and shape that ecosystem in order to, keep the resources there and keep the connections there, right? And so what it kind of sparked was this almost like, massive homesteading movement that you might see somewhere like England with their, kitchen gardens and things like that, but like to a grander level, right? And so the ability is to be sustainable. Now, like one of my favorite concepts about permaculture is probably only 20 to 30% of the fruit in forests on a permaculture farm. Like probably only 20 to 30% are edible, right? Like legumes, if you don't know, a type of tree, they actually capture atmospheric nitrogen, and they hold them kind of on the root level below the surface. Now, trees have this really interesting thing that they're actually self-pruning. People don't know this. Well, they're not really self-pruning, but they're kind of self-pruning. If you cut the top off of a tree, right? Like if you trim the top off of a tree, the roots below the surface will automatically, self-prune, right? Because, they need that balance. Now, what's interesting is if you have a tree that, you trim the top off of, that has these little, atmospheric nitrogen, things that are sitting there in the root line. Right. When you trim that off, those actually get dropped into the soil and they become available for other plants to use. So what you can do is you can plant these legume trees in the middle of your orchard. You can go in there once or twice a year. You can trim them, and this nitrogen, which is what plants need the most, really, is dropped right there in the root line for other plants to pick up and use. Right. So it's kind of like smart design, and it allows the ecosystem to flourish in the way that it was intended to flourish. Right? Like you like tomatoes, right? And like you live in the middle of the rainforest, or you like bananas and you live, in the middle of the tundra, right? Instead of trying to shape the ecosystem, right? Instead of trying to, lasso the sun and rain it in and pull it down and keep it there all year round, don't grow bananas. grow something that will grow, or move to somewhere where you grow bananas, right? Now, it's not always that easy, but like that's kind of the baseline of it. It looks at housing, right? Like we've got a massive issue with housing, and like, yes, I'm not talking about overpriced houses. I mean, but even in Japan, where houses are reasonable, the biggest problem is that you have these rows and these streets. Yes, I mean, I'm sure New York City is great with all their, first, second, third avenues. It's easy to find the way around. Like it created this model of the square city streets that, makes a lot of sense. But from an environmental and energy perspective, it's completely insane, right? Like you can actually have your house facing the direction of the rising sun, right? You can build it out of certain materials that will trap heat and repel cold. I mean, nature's really great, right? Like, I mean, have you ever touched a rock on a really hot day? It's hot. And like, then you've touched it on a really cold day, it's cold. And then you touch it at night after a really hot day, the rock is still cold, right? Now, if you can put that rock in a little bit of a house, it will actually self-regulate the temperature of the house, because that's what it does, right? So you let people do what they do and they will excel in business, right? Instead of saying to someone, okay, well, you have to do it this way because this is the way we do it, even though it makes zero sense, right? It makes no sense whatsoever at all, but this is the way that we do it. I mean, a great example is Japan. Why do we still have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 days training for new employees who are coming out of university to learn how to use fax machines? It's insane, right? But it's the same with business. It's the same with nature. It's the same with design, right? Like if you're not thinking about, certain things, then the design isn't going to be good, right? And we still live in this post industrial design era where the whole society was constructed around a 40-hour work week, right? And everything that we do is constructed around consumerism, which is like clearly unsustainable, which is kind of insane because there's a potato shortage in Japan. Like a few days ago, I went to McDonald's. I don't like McDonald's, but we went to McDonald's and, there was potatoes, but you could only get a small because there's not enough potatoes to have medium or large because there's a potato shortage. Now, I went across the street and there were potatoes on sale at the supermarket. Like they were on sale because it's like potato season. And it's like, well, why is there a potato shortage at McDonald's? And it's because it's Canada's fault, because all the potatoes come from Canada, right? And they have to go through Canada to meet the specs of that, corporate elite system. So there's no potato shortage in Japan. There's actually an excess of potatoes, which is clearly shown, that like if I could take those potatoes from the supermarket and walk in and cut them and put them in McDonald's deep fryer, right? I can save us all money, right? But I can't do that because the potatoes, they need to come from Canada. They need to be shipped over because the government agreed. Like it's just so. I guess the answer to your question is, what is permaculture? Permaculture is not just like following blindly into this. It's looking at the design system, and it's utilized mainly to maximize the ability to grow food and design ecosystems that are, well, in a way, transparent and sit there and relate directly to scarcity, right? They don't, I mean, there's no such thing as garbage in the world. It doesn't exist. I mean, this is crazy. Like, think about this. There is no garbage in the world. People create garbage because garbage is in excess of what we have or what we've created. Garbage is a byproduct of having too much of something, like more than what we need, right? And I mean, there might be too many rabbits in the forest for a while, but then eventually, the fox's population will grow and they will kill the rabbits, and the rabbits will cry like babies because that's what happens when you kill a rabbit. And then, like, seriously, if you ever heard a rabbit die, like they sound like babies. It's really bizarre. And right, you're cringing, but this is what's interesting about it, right? the most sustainable food source when it comes to meat on the planet is rabbits.
I love rabbits. We have Easter bunnies for Easter.
Right. But this is what's nuts, right? Like, oh, you can't eat the rabbits because they're cute and cuddly, and there's people who have pigs as pets too, right? Like, so this is the thing. Like, we don't always have to like have this system where we're working, right? Like, permaculture is about smart design. The most beautiful thing is like you put all of these things together and you don't have to do anything, right? Hi, how are you? Put a pig in an orchard, and you never have to clean the orchard, because when the fruit drops off the trees because it's going bad, you don't have to go and pick it up. The pig will come and eat it, and the chickens will eat all the bugs, right? And so this is what economies should be structured like too, right? Like we see that like economies are really volatile, really, right? Like when you have a shop that only sells one thing, and then there is a third world war, and the price of that one thing, which happens to be wheat, goes up in the world, like what happens to your business? Your whole business goes under, right? And so like it's about enabling diversity to capitalize upon variety in a food sustainability way, but also in a homesteading lifestyle, environmental way too. I don't know if that answered your question. What is permaculture? That's kind of what it is. It's really difficult to explain, but yeah.
That's absolutely fantastic. I have a whole pile more questions. I think you answered my second question sort of indirectly. So next one, where do we find good permaculture resources? Are you resources people? Have you taken classes? Do you read things? If I want information, where do I find it?
Yeah, so there's a pretty big movement in the States, and in England, in Australia. Like, permaculture is interesting because, like, if you want to be an accredited permaculturalist, you can take a permaculture design certificate. And so there's lots of places all over the world that offer this. And usually then they'll introduce you to certain things. So, I mean, the permaculture design manual is one. It's a monster book like this. And once you learn about what you're looking for, then you can go in and you can, find resources. So there's another one by, I think his name is Toby Hemingway, called the Permaculture Guidebook. Elizabeth Morrow does one as well. If you just research things that are permaculture and you try to look for things that outline all of the 10 principles, chapter by chapter by chapter, those are the best ones, right? Like, there's, of course, books that say like permaculture, but it's not. It's just like how to grow one plant. But it really depends on what you're looking for. There's a whole variety. And I think once you get into one of these books, then it'll kind of lead to a bunch of other things, right? Like there'll be references to other people who you'll be able to look into and you'll be able to see. But yeah, I would start with, if you like heavy reading, start with Bill Mollison, start with Toby Hemingway. These are two really good books, the ones that I use the most, and they just outline, really interesting ways to do it. I can put together a list too.
That might be fun. I'm both curious for myself and also thinking of future Christmas gifts for my mother-in-law too. So, getting all that in order. I have a couple of questions relating to my life and my situation. I don't know if you know the answers, but I'm going to try. I live in a city that doesn't have an organics waste program, which is dumb. And my vermicomposter is full, very full. And I also live in a frozen wasteland. So do you have any ideas for what I can do with my kitchen organics during the winter?
Yeah, so I actually live in the city on a balcony, and I was using something called bokashi. And what bokashi is quite interesting. It's fermentation. Mm-hmm. And so you put your kitchen scraps into this bucket, and then you sprinkle this bokashi powder on it, and it will ferment it. It's a kind of a weird smell, but I mean, it's sealed and it's closed. And then when that's done, what you do is you take it out, and you bury it. Now, the nice thing about that is you can actually put fish in there, you can put cooked food in there, you can put whatever in there, and you bury it, and that will kind of like, after time, it will decompose. Right. So vermiculture, for people who don't know, uses worms. Right.
Right.
And bokashi uses this kind of fermentation bacteria that is able to do that. But then after, the worms will come in and they'll eat it up. Now, you say you live in a frozen wasteland. I mean,
half of the year.
Right. So you could use like kind of a dualistic system, something like bokashi, or like even a bigger composter. Now, the problem with that is keeping it inside could potentially smell. If
the
you
smell's not much of an issue, but at the point it's at now, I can barely lift it. So getting it outside is going to be a challenge.
Yeah, and so like what you could do is in the spring, right? What you could do is in the fall. You could dig like a little bit of a trench in your backyard.
Okay, yeah.
Right? And then you could like cover it with plastic, right, before it freezes. And then, it's not the most optimal thing to do, but you could put, some of your compost into bokashi. And then once that bucket is full, you could go and you could put it in the trench. And then you could bring like some soil that you had saved in your garage that's warm, that isn't frozen, out and cover it over. Right.
Okay.
And I've never actually tried it, and it should work.
It sounds like it would work. What's the purpose of fermenting all of my scraps before tossing them in the garden? It makes it easier for the worms to digest, or
no? So it actually increases the amount of compost that you can use. Like, so you can put actual like cooked food in there.
Right. Okay.
And so there's no reason other than it's just a different way to do things.
Well, that and the fermentation will also help the organic matter break down a little bit easier.
Yeah, there is that. Okay, cool. I'm going to have to look into that. I'm sure somebody around here knows something about it. I've heard about it before.
Yeah, and the nice thing about that, too, is it also produces this liquid that you can mix with water. It's a little bit potent, but you can mix it with water. And it's almost like a liquid, almost like a liquid power pill for your garden, right? Like if you use that to spray it on your houseplants and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, that's one option. Like, I'm assuming like another option is just to put in another permaculture bin side by side with the one that you have, right? I mean, like you said, you live in a frozen wasteland. I saw a picture of yours the other day, and it's like, I'm waiting for my snowman to melt. It's like, what? You still have snow? What's happening, right? So.
It is half melted now, so it didn't take very long, but
right.
Yeah. Another one. The last couple of years, it seems that my part of the world is in a drought, and I live half an hour away from an actual cactus-growing sandy desert. What are some grass alternatives that'll grow in a dry climate?
Grass is like the worst possible thing that you can grow. It keeps us slaves to our environment, which is really interesting, right? Like the first grass actually came from India. The colonials brought it over. And, it sounds really bad, but they're like maidens on their hands and knees that were using it, to have to be there and cut it and prune it. And it became this like status symbol, in England, and it got transferred over to North America. But now if you look at it, all these people have these massive yards, and what do? Their only day off on Saturday, they spend, cutting the grass, right? And they become slaves to it. Now, if you look at what happens in places like Arizona, it gets amplified, because now either you have people who are, wasting vast amounts of water and resources, or you have people who are just like letting, natural mini cactuses grow in the yard, which I think is actually better. Now, what I like, honestly, and it really depends on where you live, but you can put in like perennial plants, but like a lot of people don't like this, but like I'm a really big fan of like mint, to be honest, right? Like, not the mint that grows straight up, but the mint that lays on the ground.
Right.
You can put that mint in. And what's really nice now, I don't know if you're gonna like this because, like, we know that you're a crazy cat lady and stuff like that. But like when you walk on mint, right? Like, it's incredibly tough, and if you break it, it actually compounds the mint, right? Like, if you break mint off or like certain plants off, they actually double and they'll grow, two separate things instead of one, right? And so when you walk on mint, it creates this really nice odor, right? Because you're stepping on it and you're crushing it. But also, it doesn't go bad if you walk on it too much, like grass might, right? So I like that idea. I don't always know. It really depends on how much sunlight you get and how much water you
Yeah.
get.
Mostly people are recommending right now to go with fescue because, I mean, you can take that thing and throw it in the sun and it'll probably grow.
Yeah, like mint's okay, but sometimes if there's a drought, it might die off or it might turn brown, or you might get some, like, so that's mine. That's my go-to one. The other one is you could just use like a combination of wildflowers and short grasses and things like that. I mean, it really depends. Like, do you want to entertain people and have a barbecue where you can roll and frolic in the grass? Well, you're probably just gonna have to keep being a slave to it, right? There's no direct thing that you could throw in there that would act the exact same as grass. But if you're okay to like not have grass and have something else, then there's a lot of different things. Like in Japan, actually, there's some weird stuff that happens in Japan. In Japan, they actually come in certain places and they dig up all the grass. They take it off and they put in winter grass in these little squares, 1 by 1 squares, and they put it in. And then when the winter's over, they come and they take all the winter grass out, like, these squares of grass, and then they put in summer grass. Right. And like, this is a whole industry where they change the grass depending upon the season, because like one grows better in another season. It's like really bizarre, and it does my head in. It's like, if you have to, like, how much money are you spending to do this at your school every single year? And like, then for 3 months after, like, so for 3 weeks after you change it, nobody can walk on it because like it's kind of has to rejuvenate. And so my thing is, a lot, like, my dad is great. Like, he just mows over everything, and it's like, if there's weeds or things in there, like, for the most part, he just cuts over it, and you can't tell unless you're down there with a magnifying glass, right? I don't know in your case, like, why you want to get rid of it, but if you don't want to cut it, like, just put in something that doesn't grow. And if you want to like keep cats away, put in mint.
I don't mind cutting it. I have a very dry front yard that's sun facing, and it mostly just dies, especially if it's not raining. It just dies because I'm not watering it. That's
I mean, yeah, you could potentially, I don't know if it would work too, but like another good one is clover. If you fill that with
clover in the backyard, and it's slowly getting bigger and bigger. I love it.
And that's another nitrogen sink as well. So like, if you have trees and things like that around, like, again, in the front yard, I don't know what your city rules are, but put up a couple trees. And if you put up a couple trees, that will create shade areas.
Yeah.
Which then will, hold some of that heat in. Another thing that you can do is you can bury big terracotta. You can bury big terracotta pots. You can dig a big hole, and you can bury a big terracotta pot, and you can fill that terracotta pot with water, and you can cover the top of it with wood or something like that. And the thing with terracotta is it kind of absorbs water.
Yeah.
If it's not sealed, it will absorb water. But the thing with it is it will absorb water, but then it will also leak water out the other side. So if you bury it, it will actually act as like a self-watering mechanism, and the water will filter out very slowly through the terracotta, into the surrounding earth.
Which and do a drip feed.
Right, which helps with evaporation. It helps it, keep it cool. Things like that work as well. Now, if it's a whole front yard, it's really difficult. You'd have to have a pretty big, or multiple pots all over. But like, combinations of these things are possible, right?
Yeah, I'm getting a whole bunch of good ideas now. Thank you. I really appreciate that. So what projects have you been working on that fit within the whole permaculture thing?
Yeah, honestly, like I haven't done almost anything since I got into crypto. Like it's kind of really sad. Like the principles for crypto are the same. The ideal for me was to get out of the city at some point, because the business was okay, but it's quite difficult to run a business where you teach people that like growing food on their balcony is a good idea, especially when you have some of the best food in the country and cheapest markets down the street. There are people who grow things in flower pots. There's kind of a different culture, not permaculture here, but a different culture of people who grow their own food. And in the country, people basically give land away because like there's no value in growing food because it's quite cheap, and they can't make money off of it. So my whole idea was eventually to move somewhere where I can have a self-sustaining system, and work on that. I used to work in Hawaii for this volunteer organization, and we would go around and we would do these things called permablitz, and you could put your name on the list, and you could go and you could volunteer to help somebody reform their backyard. And then after you've done that twice, you can put your house on the list, and people would come and do that. So if I get back to an English-speaking country, I would like to head up something like that. Where you could create this community aspect. But yeah, like right now, to do it in Japanese, almost impossible because people don't invite other people to their house really to do these sorts of things, and B, like, yeah. I wish I could do more. It's hard when you get sucked down the crypto rabbit hole to do anything else, really.
I'm discovering this. Yes. Okay. A couple more kind of do-it-yourself or at-homer type things. You gave me a water conservation or water usage tip there that I wasn't expecting, so that answered that one. What are some functional alternatives to air conditioning during a heat wave?
So again,
coolers.
If the house is designed in a good way, I don't know, then you can use like things like stone to
that's my basement.
Keep things cooler. Now, what they do in Japan, which I quite like, which is like it's a little bit crazy, it's a little bit insane, but like sometimes just take one of those ice packs and hang it in front of a fan.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Like, and it's like a classic car in Cuba that's been duct taped together, but like it works, right? And so if you can do something like that. You can also, depending upon why your house is hot, you could extend the awning of your house so that the sun can't get in, and then you could cover, the floor with stone or tile or something like that, which keeps it cooler throughout the day. Another good one, I think, is like green curtains. In Japan, they use them a lot. They will put up Goya, which is a bitter gourd. It's kind of like a cucumber, like a long vine like that. And that will grow straight up and cover like the whole house, which will, again, keep the sun out, which keeps the cool in for longer. Things like that. Basically, I think with heat waves, it's difficult because it's the humidity in the air, not always the sun. But yeah, those are my options. Without seeing the actual place, it would be
Yeah. Now the other thing that's really starting to catch on, and it's been in Japan forever, are the mini splits. Those mini splits are really starting to catch on because they're, number one, they're simple to put up. Number two, you don't need a duct. It's all ductless. And number three, the amount of freon that's used by a mini split compared to your traditional air conditioning system is almost half.
I don't know what you're talking. What's a mini split?
Oh, the mini splits. The air conditioners that are just like the air conditioners that are just on a wall, they look like big white units.
Okay, yeah. So that's just an air conditioner, man. We don't call them mini splits. We just call them.
Yeah, well, here
Yeah,
in the
right.
States
So,
we call them mini splits.
yeah,
Yeah,
okay. You're talking about the ones that are built into the building, or the ones that sit in your window.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, I see what you mean. Yeah, so in Japan, for people who don't know, in Japan, actually the motor of the aircon actually sits outside on the balcony, and then the air conditioner like runs through a hose into the inside, which is kind of interesting. Although it does have the drawback of sitting on a concrete balcony and pumping out hot air, which actually makes the balcony hotter. But like they're superior, like in terms of economics and things like that. And I think you can order them in Canada. So if you're going to do that, they're definitely more efficient, more quiet than those, really loud ones that like, go in the window. And yeah, I didn't realize they were called mini splits, to be honest.
Yeah, that one was entirely selfish question. We were going to get air conditioning last year and needed to upgrade the electrical panel, and lo and behold, there was a shortage of breakers that has not quite resolved.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I would look at, like, if you can look at changing the material. Even like tile will stay cooler for longer.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to think about that a little bit more. Okay, so switching gears again here, tell me a bit about the crypto projects that you're working with. I know about one of them because we work together. What else are you involved with?
Yeah, so I'm part of the Uplift world, which is fun. It's a metaverse project. I don't do Minecraft, but yeah, I kind of found Corey through trying to do some charity things on the blockchain from quite a while ago. That's a whole other story. But I also work for GenerEOS. GenerEOS is a block producer on EOS. And they're based in Australia. You don't know what a block producer is. It's basically a blockchain that doesn't use mining like Bitcoin. There's like kind of a social aspect to it, and these people have to keep producing the blocks, and they get compensated for it. So I do media for them. There's the Pomelo pitch grants, which is a funding mechanism for new projects over in EOS and EOS.io. So one of the things that I do for GenerEOS is I do pitch deck episodes, which is like 20 minutes. This is the hardest thing I've ever done, is like to conduct a 20-minute interview. As people know, I'm not the quietest person. And so, we try to get that information out there. I also do shows or interviews across various networks. I work kind of closely with the Meta Collect people. I'm not really like part of their team. I'm kind of more of an unofficial member, but I do a couple shows a week with Sean Ballant, who's the co-founder over there. They started out writing, and then they kind of got into the business of creating NFTs. They're responsible for Finnies, Mongs, the Crunks. They've got a really cool project called Underground, which is basically across 5 different blockchains: EOS, Wax, Tezos, Ethereum, and Terra. And what they do is they go around and they buy up art on the blockchain, and then they give them out as part of their membership. So I run a couple of shows. That's fun. I run a couple of shows with with Sean, where we do interviews and projects like that. I've bounced around the space a lot. I've been working for various social projects and things like that. But right now, it's kind of I'm kind of mostly focused on those 3 projects because I just don't have time to do more.
That's completely understandable.
So, let's talk a little bit more about the Pomelo grant here. For the people that may not know, what is the advantage of getting a Pomelo grant, and what chain is it on, and how is it going to benefit me being the average person that's like, hey, this is cool. How do I get, how's it going to benefit me?
Go watch my crazy episode with Contessa last night. It was really insane.
You know,
you would actually love her. I should introduce you to her because you guys would have fun together. But she, so we talked about this. Now, the benefit of Pomelo is its quadratic funding. So what that means is that there's a matching pool that goes in, and unlike a lot of funding mechanisms, right? Like you could have $1 million that is donated. Let's just say 10. You have $10. A million's better. You can have $1 million that's donated by one person, and that's a good thing in the normal funding models. But what quadratic funding does actually is it rewards people kind of exponentially for the number of people that support it, right? So if you have 10 people that are donating $1 each, the matching pool is going to expand beyond one person that's just donating $10, right? And so the power of quadratic funding was actually first envisioned on Ethereum. And so they picked that up and they moved it over to EOS. Now, one of the big problems with EOS is that, EOS came out of the Block 1 era, which was Dan Larimer. And, he created other blockchains, but it wasn't sustainable because there was no funding and there was nobody doing anything on it. There's some great developers that are working on EOS. The technology is great, but there was nobody doing anything. And part of the reason that like a lot of other projects were moving to other blockchains is because there was no funding, right? And so what Pomelo did was it kind of brought back the potential to fund projects that were trying to build on EOS, right? And so technically the criteria for getting your Pomelo grant application accepted is that it offers a public good or a public service, right? And it can be anywhere across EOS.io. Now, what's the benefit of you doing that? Well, I mean, you can get funding, which is great. But now, if you're in blockchain or you have people who are a part of blockchain, understand blockchain, it's amazing. Now, what Contessa said to me yesterday, which is quite interesting because I never thought about this, if you're coming from outside of the ecosystem and you want to put in a proposal that people who have no idea how to support it because they don't even know how to buy EOS, it's a little bit complicated. So when you ask the question, what does it get me? I think it really depends on who your target audience is. And like, I want to say everyone go and check out Pomelo. I want to say everyone is a great opportunity. But the bottom line is, I mean, EOS is still really small compared to other cryptocurrencies. Right.
Correct. So, and that's due to the fact that Block 1 never really did anything with it. They had this thing that was fantastic. I mean, I remember, when I first met you, we were head first with EOS and stuff like that. We were, it was supposed to be the chain to end all chains. And it was good because it was quick, it was fast, and it was reliable. The only problem is Block 1 was like, let's go ahead. We're going to put something out maybe next year. We'll put something out maybe next year and stuff like that. And they just kept doing that until finally Larimer's just like, okay, shit or get off the pot. And now that they're off the pot, we're actually starting to see the Pomelo grants and stuff like that starting to flourish, which is great because I've always loved EOS as a system itself. Wax is great. Do not get me wrong, but I've always loved the simplicity of EOS. It's just you go, you have the wallet. The wallet always needed work. I'm going to tell you that. I always hated the wallet, but now that we've got Anchor, that whole thing is gone. So that whole hurdle is gone. But it's really easy to program on EOS. It's real easy to get into that system, and I love the fact that it is so robust. I mean, if I'm right, I think Wax was actually forked from EOS, correct?
The other way, actually. Wax was originally on Ethereum, and they ported over to utilize EOS.io technology. I would disagree with you a little bit. Like, I guess maybe I'm agreeing with you, but like the wallet was a big issue. I mean, the nice thing about Wax, and Jen knows this because she did another tutorial on this, but the nice thing about Wax was from very early days, they had the Wax Cloud wallet, which was basically a social login wallet. Now, what you saw with EOS was EOS came out and they kind of replicated this with the Wombat wallet, which is pretty user-friendly and pretty easy to use. I definitely recommend that you go and you check out, Jen's tutorial on how to get, a Wombat wallet. You were looking into Wax as a blockchain, but the same goes for Telos. The same goes for EOS. I think they have an Ethereum option as well over there. So definitely, like, onboarding is a little bit of an issue. The problem with EOS predominantly is CPU and like resources, right? Like,
Yeah.
you have to have a certain amount of EOS staked because it's not a mineable token. There's no gas to pay fees. Now Anchor's kind of changed that a little bit with their protocol, but like it could be over people's head, right? Like, so why do you have to have this resources? Why aren't my transactions working and things like that? I'm hoping that it will become easier, but like you said, there's now a lot of interest that's coming back. Some of the smartest developers, I think, in the world are working on EOS, building on EOS. Like, I mean, we know people who are over at Legend, like over at Meta Collect, that like have been in this space for a really long time, that are just like brilliant at what they do. Some of the best developers in the world, and they're still on EOS because they believe in the technology. I mean, shout out to people like John Boyd and Aaron Cox. These people are heads down, building and developing. The team over at like EOS Nation as well, good friends of ours. I think that the capacity and potential for this to actually be a usable blockchain when the world adopts it is pretty big. Now, I'm not sure when the world is going to adopt blockchain, because to me, it's kind of insane that they haven't already. And so it might not happen as soon as we think, right?
Exactly. And didn't the big four just basically get together to go ahead and promise that not only will EOS be developed, but EOSIO is going to actually be co-developed as well, if I'm correct.
Yeah, so there's some interesting things that happened. Like back in the early days, some blockchains started breaking away because of issues with Block One. I mean, Telos is a good example. They thought that like the governance model was really bad, and they wanted to like cap whales. So they ported over and they created their own blockchain. There was some animosity there for a long period of time, right? Like Wax kind of came in and they did their own thing. I mean, Ultra's over there doing gaming. We don't even know what's going on with them. Like, they're EOSIO, but they're like not touching anything, right? You had issues with like UX, who was they were supposed to be the financial hub. They're kind of still in the fray. Like Proton, they kind of ported over to half Ethereum. Now, and so you had all of these blockchains that were fragmented, and a lot of them were trying to be disconnected from EOS. Now, what you have with the EOS Network Foundation is you have a lot of these big people who develop their own EOSIO based blockchains. Now they're coming back and they're sitting in the same room and looking at it, and they're like, okay, like, let's bring this ecosystem back together. Now that we have this kind of community initiative run by the ENF, that's like delving out funding where funding is needed, all of these other blockchains are looking at it and saying, oh, look, we actually have the power to be able to come back and use this, right? Like, it's the way that the ecosystem, the crypto ecosystem is structured is really not good for mass society, right? Like,
exactly.
you remember back in the days when you had that ATM card, right?
Yeah.
Like, think about it. You live in a town, you have to actually go to your bank to be able to get money out of the ATM card, because there's no little plus sign on the back of it. What's the point in having an ATM card if you actually have to go to your bank, right? I guess like you could put a bank machine somewhere, but like the whole value of that, the ATM card, is that it can be used anywhere. The same with Visa, right? Like most people expect Visa, MasterCard, I mean, American Express, depending upon where you are, but you can use it anywhere. It doesn't matter as long as the infrastructure is there. You can't do that with crypto, right? Like we're not at the point where you can move things from one blockchain to another. You've got to have 10 different crypto wallets just to collect 10 of your favorite artists across 10 different blockchains. It's not sustainable. It's not workable. The beautiful thing about EOSIO is it's all based on the same technology. So once you have those developers that can code, once you have those chains that can talk to one another, it creates many more possibilities. And I think that was always the grand vision. Many blockchains doing many different things that can all be compatible and talk to one another.
Right. I think I remember like a long time ago, they were talking many to one type of thing. So this way, you can retain your individuality, but there's always going to be a core piece of it, so you can exchange all the stuff between. And I've always been the biggest proponent of that, because it doesn't matter. You could sit there and you could build the best damn thing on the face of this planet, quick, fast, easy, and people love it. But if it's only in that bubble type of economy, what the hell good is it going to be? So
But
yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
it's the QWERTY keyboard complex, right? Like
Yeah.
everyone uses a QWERTY keyboard because that's the one that was adopted, but like nobody wants to learn how to, myself included, how to use a new kind of keyboard. But it's not the most efficient keyboard that's ever been created.
Oh yeah,
Right?
no,
There are many more efficient ones.
I mean, you'll have people that are sitting there in the Dvorak camp, going Dvorak till I die. Oh my God, I had it when I was in when way back in the day when I was traveling and stuff like that. We were in France, and I pulled out my first Dvorak keyboard. I'm like, what the hell is this damn thing? I actually thought they got the wrong keyboard for the mainframe, but no, it was a mainframe. So the mainframe manufacturers wanted you to be in Dvorak. I'm not the fastest typer in the world, but I'm not the slowest one. But while I was sitting there, I'm just going dink, 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 looking like a trained monkey doing this. So,
yeah, man, like I can't even imagine trying to learn how to use another keyboard right now.
Oh yeah.
So it would be. I mean, I guess we could do the whole American imperial thing and just be like, okay, everyone who was born after 1998, they're going to use the other keyboard and not the QWERTY anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. And speaking of the American and imperial, don't you just love it how now everything is measured in tangible objects? So it's now 3 refrigerators tall or 2 eagle spans wide or something like that. You gotta love it.
Is that how they do it?
The thing is when Corona came by, people didn't really understand how big 6 feet was. So they had to add some kind of tangible aspect to it so people could relate. So instead of saying, hey, stay 6 feet apart, they would say, the zoos would say, stay a hippopotamus length apart. Or Best Buy or something like that, stay 2 refrigerators apart. It got so comical after a while.
That's kind of interesting, to be honest.
I went to when Corona was in its heyday. I was still working with a orthopedic group, and so we had to use the nomenclature that came from the government. So it was always 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. I remember we went somewhere for lunch, and it said stay 30 hamburgers apart. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Why don't you say 2 benches apart or something like that? But no, stay 30 hamburgers apart. I'm like, oh Jesus, Marianne and Joseph. So then then I'm sitting there trying to. I mean, thank God I knew. You just go like this. I'm 5 feet. If you can touch somebody, you're too damn close. Right. But now I got to think, how big is a goddamn hamburger?
It was. Yeah, I mean, yeah. That's.
And especially, is it a quarter pounder? Is it a Big Mac? Is it a double? Is it a double Whopper or something like that? What's the unit of measurement here? So that was always a good fun thing. So before we go ahead and head on out, Jimmy, number one, I just want to say thank you for taking the time out. I know it's real early where you are, and we don't get to talk like this a lot, and getting here and getting to know a little bit more about Jimmy is always a good thing, because while we always kid, and say you're the madman with the microphone, you can have a rant at any moment in time, and you sit there and you speak your mind, which is one of the best things ever, but we never really know Jimmy, and now we actually get to know a little bit more of Jimmy, and to be honest with you, that is like the best goddamn thing ever. I mean, to quote Corey, it's fucking awesome.
Well, thank you. I mean, I like it's weird, this space that we live in, and it's I think it's always interesting just to meet and talk to people, because everyone's in it for their own reasons, and I just want the world to be a better place because people can find the ability to utilize crypto. And I think like what you guys are trying to pull off with EverSmart labs is not an easy task, because there's 2 things that like the world doesn't really have time for, and that's crypto and the environment. And like, I'm not being like trying to be mean, but like most people they're not paying attention unless it's baked into their culture, like Jen, like I'm pretty sure if you're not composting where you are, like you're a major weirdo, right? Like, and that like if you're not using the spices that you're growing in your backyard from your kitchen garden in England, like you're a little bit strange, right? Like, or you're living in London, and you don't have a kitchen garden, right? Like, so it's baked into the culture, a lot of these things, right? But there's a lot of places in the world that they're not paying attention to the environment. They're not paying attention to smart cities, right? They're just trying to catch up, because their society was kind of thrown into disarray while the West was kind of being built and using all these resources and polluting the earth. They were in the backwaters, and now the West is saying, "Oh no, you're not allowed to do that because you have to protect the environment." And they're looking over at us, being like, "No, like screw you, like we're gonna do whatever we want, right?" But then you see like some amazing things that are coming out of countries like China, where they're like really stepping it up and coming back threefold on the tech level. I mean, Malaysia, if you ever have the chance to go to Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, right, like we have family there, I mean, it's absolutely amazing how tuned in to environments some of these massive cities are, especially in Asia, that we're not even paying attention to, right? And so I'm really excited to see how this kind of all pans out, because not everyone is like an American or a Canadian or a Western European. Right? There's places in the world where people still use cash. Can you believe that? When I go to the store, I use cash. Like most people in this country still use cash, right?
Oh yeah.
We're not always plugged into this, debit card, charge everything, debt everything, which becomes really an interesting scenario, because when you have a society that uses predominantly cash, how do you get them to switch over to like crypto? How do you get them to pay attention to like the environment and grow their own food? So I think you guys are kind of you're running an uphill battle, but I really like the direction that you're headed in, and I think it's going to be really important, for society, and it's going to be difficult to synthesize all of these things together. But like one of my favorite places, hands down, in the world is New Zealand. Right? Like if you could pick up any country and you could drop it in the middle of like an environmental safe haven of a model to, towards progression and environmentalism and resource management, like New Zealand would be the one. They've got their problems, but like, they're using train cars to create cafes to be able to have, ecosystems and businesses and models that work. Could you plug that system into all of America? Probably not. I mean, America's too big. They're too diverse. They're too wide. But you could do it on a small scale, like what you guys are trying to do, at least to get started. So, yeah, hats off to what you guys are doing. And thanks, Jen and Nick, for having me on the show. I always love talking.
Yep. But before you go, I got two things. I got one last question, and I have one surprise for you.
All right.
The last question that I have for you is this. The Swingin' Jimmy D. How did you ever get that nickname? I know how, but there's a lot of people that don't.
Yeah, I don't know. Like we were just talking about, Sean and I, we were talking about, so that's a crunk. The crunks are a project over in Terra that was, created by what is now the MetaCollect crew. They were the people that were behind, CryptoFinny and CryptoWriter, and they decided to launch a pixel art. They've got a great pixel artist project, a PFP project over on Terra, and they did this. And Sean and I have been talking. Sean's from Miami, and so Sean and I have been talking about, various things. And for whatever reason, he just started calling me like Swingin' Jimmy. Right. And I like, we do this show. It's quite late for me. It's like my kind of night out of the house in the living room. And he's got this weird thing with like, to me, it's bizarre because I don't really get it. But he's like, if I ever pick you up at the airport, like, I'm just going to bring this. Because like, I think, in Miami, these short yellow shorts and like this whole almost like retirement, like Seinfeld complex type of thing. Right. And so that just kind of came about. And for whatever reason, he just thought that it would be really fun. And so he kind of put it together And then it just became a thing. I think he just set it off beat one time, and then now we introduced the show. I become Swinging Jimmy D on the show. I mean, it's better, I guess, than the Great Wet Whale of Words. So the whole other thing by our friend by our friend Bo Shipples. But yeah, I mean, you just kind of got to run with it sometimes. Like honestly, I don't even know the background of the story. He coined it. It worked. Yeah. And that's kind of what we do. Yep. But I mean, there's some jokes now that have been built into it.
Yep. And now it's taken me a while here. It's taken me almost a full year, maybe a couple of years. But I think I've actually found the key I found the key to your new life here in the streaming world. I have found your introduction music. Hang on one second, and I will share. Let's see.
It's either going to be really good or really bad.
Hang tight. Let me know if you can hear it, because sometimes it doesn't play. So give me one. So let me know if you can hear this. So there it is, Jimmy D's intro music.
That's actually there's an echo.
Hold on. Let me unshare. All right. Now good.
That's actually really good. That's like is there a band? Where is that? Is that
That is something that I had a buddy of mine generate.
Okay, because there's a very similar band that I used to listen to that that's carbon copy almost of that. Like it's really I don't mean it's copy, but
yeah,
it's got that kind of weird Indian tea room reverberation sitting on the floor. I love it, man. That's awesome. Actually, that's really good. I like it a lot. That's totally
hey, it's yours. It's yours as long as you need it, brother. I will make sure to get it to you as soon as possible. Yeah, and so once again, this is Jimmy D. We will make sure that we have him a couple more times, because this man, like I said, he loves to talk, and the words that come out of his mouth are like music to me. And good.
Yeah, I try.
Way more questions.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would love to come back anytime, and it was actually quite nice to be able to talk about permaculture, because normally we're talking about crypto. So thanks for those questions, Jen.
Exactly. And on that note, I just want to go ahead and say thank you once again, Jimmy, and thank you, Jen, for joining us so late here. And to the rest of y'all watching out there, make sure that you go ahead and you smash that like button and subscribe, because we need those subscribers. And make sure that you take a look at our website, which is https://eversmartlabs.com. And here's the thing for our Discord channel. For all things EverSmart, you can go ahead and track the project and all that kind of stuff. And for EverSmart Labs, this is Nick Capello saying thank you for watching and have a wonderful day. Jimmy, do you want to do the chop?